A slap echoes in a hall of justice, not the crack of a gavel, but the raw, ugly sound of violence striking authority. When two Melbourne police officers, steeped in generations of unchecked power and simmering prejudice, physically assault a quiet Indigenous woman in a packed courtroom, they believe it's just another Tuesday, another assertion of dominance that will fade into the bureaucratic haze. They are catastrophically wrong. The woman they struck is not a defendant, not a clerk, not an unfortunate bystander. She is Judge Eleanor Vance, one of the most respected jurists in the room, a woman who clawed her way to the bench through decades of fighting the very system these officers embody. In the 4 minutes following that slap, an empire built on silence, favors, and fear begins to tremble, then crack, then crumble. This is not merely a story of assault, it is the anatomy of a reckoning, an exposé of arrogance meeting its match, and the unleashing of a justice that doesn't just whisper, it roars. Before we witness the full force of this courtroom confrontation and its explosive aftermath, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss a single moment of this unfolding drama. Melbourne, Victoria, a city of vibrant culture and hidden histories. Its grand Victorian architecture and bustling laneways often served as a dynamic facade, masking fault lines of power and inequality that ran deep beneath the surface. Judge Eleanor Vance knew these fault lines intimately. At 62, she moved through the imposing county court building with a quiet gravity earned over 30 years. Her silver-streaked hair, pulled back severely, framed a face dominated by sharp, intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing. She had navigated these halls first as a barrister, championing the marginalized, then as a crown prosecutor, determined to root out corruption from within, and now as a respected judge. Her ascent hadn't been universally welcomed. She felt the subtle resistance, the lingering surprise in some colleagues' eyes, the weight of being a symbol as well as a jurist. Breaking ceilings, she knew, often meant enduring the falling debris. As she passed through security that morning, the court officers offered respectful nods. Eleanor acknowledged them curtly, her mind already dissecting the morning's list. Routine mentions, a juvenile matter, a bail hearing, yet her finely honed instincts, cultivated over decades, prickled. Something felt discordant, off-key. Her associate met her outside the courtroom doors, his smile tight. "Good morning, Your Honor. Sergeant Kerrigan is already inside." Eleanor paused, a flicker of apprehension touching her. "Kerrigan?" "Yes, Your Honor. Sergeant David Kerrigan, arresting officer in the Patterson case. He's been insistent." Eleanor's jaw tightened fractionally. David Kerrigan, mid-40s, clean cut, came from a family with deep roots in Victoria Police. He walked through the world with an unearned smirk and a network of favors that kept his personnel file suspiciously clean despite persistent rumors, harassment, excessive force, misconduct complaints that evaporated like morning mist. Eleanor had encountered his name, his attitude, his casual disregard for protocol too many times in case files. She stepped into the courtroom quietly, deliberately leaving her robe behind for now. Kerrigan was already there, leaning against the prosecution bar table, arms crossed, radiating impatience. The teenage defendant, Patterson, looked terrified beside his legal aid lawyer. Kerrigan didn't even acknowledge Eleanor's entrance. He barked towards the court clerk. "Let's get this started. Haven't got all day." Eleanor's voice cut through the room, calm but firm. "I suggest you find the time, Sergeant." Kerrigan finally turned, staring at her. Confusion flickered across his face. He was trying to place her. Clerk? Associate? Court officer, maybe? Unrobed, off the bench, she clearly registered as insignificant in his hierarchy. "You here for the defense?" he asked, the question laced with smug condescension. Eleanor ignored him, moving to a side table to review a file. The courtroom was sparsely populated. A few early journalists, some lawyers, two uniformed officers lounging near the back wall. Kerrigan, visibly irritated by her lack of deference, strode towards her. "Oi, I'm talking to you. I said..." And then it happened. Fast, shocking, irreversible. A sharp, open-handed slap cracked across Eleanor's face. The sound reverberated in the cavernous room. Time froze. A collective intake of breath. Papers stopped rustling. A pen clattered to the floor. Even the overhead lights seemed to flicker. Eleanor didn't move, didn't flinch, though her cheek stung fiercely. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her head, her gaze locking onto Kerrigan's. He took a half-step back, a flicker of surprise, perhaps at his own impulsive violence, crossing his features, but no remorse, none at all. His lips curled. "You people need to learn some respect," he muttered, the words dripping with venom. A horrified whisper from the back. "Oh my God!" Another. "Did he just—" But Eleanor's eyes never left Kerrigan. He straightened, oblivious, doubling down on his arrogance. "I don't care who you think you are. You don't get to strut around this courtroom acting like—" Eleanor took a single step forward, then another. The silence in the room became absolute, suffocating. The clerk whispered urgently, She's not in her robe yet." Kerrigan didn't hear. He didn't see the dawning horror on the faces around him, the slow realization spreading like wildfire. And then Eleanor spoke, her voice quiet, cold, imbued with an authority that needed no judicial vestments. "Is this how you treat officers of the court, Sergeant?" The color drained from one of the officers at the back. A lawyer visibly dropped their pen onto the table. Kerrigan blinked rapidly. What are you talking about?" Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She walked deliberately towards the raised bench, ascended the steps, turned, and faced him from behind the judge's chair. For one long, shattering moment, the courtroom held its breath. Sergeant David Kerrigan stood frozen, staring up at Judge Eleanor Vance, now seated in the place of ultimate authority. The gavel lay untouched, yet judgment had already descended. Kerrigan blinked, the reality crashing down. Disbelief, then a dawning, visceral fear he likely hadn't felt since his academy days. Eleanor clasped her hands, letting the silence stretch, amplifying the tension until it was almost unbearable. Even court officer Leo Murphy, the stoic bailiff, seemed rigid with shock. "Sergeant Kerrigan," Eleanor finally stated, her voice calm but slicing through the quiet. "Did you just strike me in this courtroom?" Kerrigan's mouth worked, but no sound emerged. His tongue darted nervously. I didn't know who you were," he stammered, grasping for an excuse. "That is not what I asked." Eleanor cut him off sharply. "Did you put your hand on me? Yes or no?" People in the gallery shifted. A phone camera was subtly raised, the incident transforming from shocking breach to documented evidence. Kerrigan drew himself up, attempting to bluster his way out. "You came at me. I didn't recognize you. You weren't robed. I thought—" "You thought I was beneath you," Eleanor finished for him, the words landing like stones. Kerrigan's jaw clenched. "You're twisting this." "I am describing precisely what occurred," she retorted, her voice like steel. "You assaulted a woman, unprovoked, in a court of law. Your only defense appears to be ignorance, compounded by arrogance." He took an involuntary step forward, then checked himself, glancing desperately towards the officers at the back. They avoided his gaze. Eleanor's voice dropped, sharper still. "If I were a white male judge sitting here, would you have slapped me?" Kerrigan's silence was deafening, a confession louder than any words. "I'll take that as a no," Eleanor stated coldly. "And you have now compounded assault with contempt and blatant bias." "You're overreacting," Kerrigan finally exploded, losing control. "I was doing my job. That kid," he pointed towards the terrified teenage defendant, Patterson, "is a thug. I caught him red-handed." "Enough." Eleanor's voice thundered, the gavel slamming down, once, twice. "You do not justify assault by denigrating a juvenile defendant whose case has yet to be heard." She turned to the clerk, her tone crisp. "Ms. Harper, enter into the record that Sergeant David Kerrigan has admitted, on the record, to striking a sitting judge in this courtroom without cause." Kerrigan staggered back slightly, the full weight of his actions finally hitting him. This wasn't a street encounter he could spin later. This wasn't a complaint he could make disappear. Eleanor addressed the bailiff. "Court Officer Murphy, is this courtroom under video surveillance?" "Yes, Your Honor," Murphy confirmed immediately. "Then the record will also reflect irrefutable visual evidence." Kerrigan's eyes darted to the small, dark domes in the ceiling corners, the blinking red lights suddenly seeming like accusatory eyes. Fear, raw and undisguised, washed over his face. "I didn't mean—" he started weakly. Eleanor raised a hand, silencing him. "You've had 20 years of not meaning it, Sergeant. I've read your file. I've seen the pattern of complaints, the convenient disappearances of evidence. But today is different. This happened here, in front of witnesses, under cameras, to a judge." She leaned forward slightly. "I have spent my life watching men like you mistake force for law, fear for order, and silence for consent. Not today." She stood. the entire courtroom seemingly rising with her. "In accordance with the authority vested in me," she announced, her voice ringing with judicial power, "and under the relevant sections of the Victorian Crimes Act concerning assault on a public official, I hereby place Sergeant David Kerrigan under formal judicial investigation." A collective gasp filled the room. Eleanor turned to the bailiff. "Court Officer Murphy, place Sergeant Kerrigan under temporary detainment. No cuffs yet. Maintain professional courtesy for now, but he is not to leave this room." Kerrigan's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "And yet," Eleanor replied quietly, her eyes holding his, "you knew enough to hit me." Kerrigan looked around wildly, searching for support, for an ally. There were none. Just the stunned faces, the recording cameras, and the slow, inexorable closing of the trap he had sprung upon himself. The courtroom doors clicked shut behind the bailiff, Court Officer Murphy, leaving Sergeant Kerrigan standing rigid, face flushed, fists clenched, trapped in the sudden, suffocating silence. Judge Eleanor Vance remained standing behind the bench, her gaze fixed on him, unwavering. The Crown Prosecutor assigned to the original vandalism case finally found his voice, sounding pale and shaken. "Your Honor, do you wish to proceed with the list?" Eleanor turned her attention to him slowly. "That decision is pending, Mr. Hayes. First, I want to address the gallery." Her eyes swept across the journalists, lawyers, and remaining officers. What just transpired in this room transcends courtroom decorum. It strikes at the heart of judicial integrity and public trust. She looked directly at the reporters. "You witnessed an on-duty officer physically assault a judge. You heard his justification, or lack thereof. I expect you to report that accurately, because if the law cannot protect its own arbiters from such blatant contempt, then we must question the very foundation upon which this system stands." The room remained utterly still. Kerrigan scoffed, a desperate, reflexive sound. "Turning this into a damn press conference now?" Eleanor turned back to him, her voice dangerously soft. "Is that what you perceive this as, Sergeant? Public accountability? A mere spectacle?" She descended the steps from the bench, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor, each step deliberate, closing the distance between them. "You've operated under a shield of protection for a long time, haven't you?" She murmured, her voice low but amplified by the tense silence. "I know your type. The kind who assumes everyone in the room is beneath them unless proven otherwise. The kind who pleads ignorance when they mean indifference." Kerrigan shifted, glancing towards Murphy, who remained impassive. "Let me be clear about what happens next," Eleanor continued, her voice regaining its judicial authority. "Police Professional Standards Command is being notified as we speak. A formal complaint will be submitted to the State Attorney General's office before noon. The video footage of this incident will be preserved as evidence." Kerrigan's bluster finally cracked. "You're destroying my life, my career, over a misunderstanding." "No, Sergeant," Eleanor corrected him firmly. "You destroyed your career the moment your hand made contact with my face." The finality was absolute. He looked desperately towards the door where the young defendant, Patterson, had been moments before, as if seeking some bizarre validation. The boy was gone, but the memory of his wide, fearful eyes seemed to linger. "I've served this state for 20 years, Kerrigan protested, his voice rising in near panic. "Risked my life, taken down real criminals, and you're throwing me to the wolves over one mistake?" Eleanor walked back towards the bench, ascending the steps with regal composure. "I am not throwing you to the wolves, Sergeant," she stated as she reached the top. "I am delivering you to the law you swore to uphold, the law you've hidden behind for 2 decades. Today that badge offers no sanctuary. Today it demands accountability." She sat, her judicial gown settling around her like armor. Tapping the microphone, she addressed the room. "This court is not adjourned. However, the mention for the defendant Patterson is rescheduled. The arresting officer has irrevocably compromised the integrity of this hearing." The young legal aid lawyer stood quickly. "Thank you, Your Honor." "Escort your client safely out to the west exit," Eleanor instructed. As Patterson left, he cast one last unreadable glance back at Kerrigan. Kerrigan himself had gone quiet now, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a dawning, calculating dread. Eleanor watched him, then leaned into the microphone again. "Court Officer Murphy, please escort Sergeant Kerrigan to Holding Room B. I will personally contact Professional Standards Command and the Chief Commissioner myself. This incident is no longer an internal matter. It is criminal." Kerrigan didn't resist, as Murphy gently guided him towards the side door, but as he passed the bench, he shot one last defiant look at Eleanor. "You think you've won, don't you?" Eleanor didn't meet his gaze. She simply whispered, loud enough only for the closest microphones to catch, "I think, for once, the right person is losing." The door closed behind him, leaving a profound silence in its wake. The news spread through the Melbourne courts complex, and then the city like an electrical current. A sitting judge assaulted by a police sergeant, in open court, on camera. It was unprecedented, explosive. By the time Judge Eleanor Vance reached her chambers, her phone was already buzzing with missed calls. The Chief Commissioner's office, Professional Standards Command, the Victorian Bar president. She ignored them for the moment, needing to center herself. She removed her judicial gown, hanging it carefully, then examined her reflection. The red mark on her cheek was fading, but the memory of the impact, the sheer audacity of it, remained vivid. How many others had endured worse from Kerrigan, from officers like him, with no cameras rolling, no judge's authority to shield them? The thought hardened her resolve. A sharp knock preceded her longtime court officer, Leo Murphy. He entered, closing the door securely, his usual stoic expression tighter than normal. "He's in holding, Judge," Leo confirmed. "Professional Standards Command is en route. 2 investigators." He paused. Word from the registry. Kerrigan's police association reps made calls within minutes. "They're trying to contain this. Spin it." "Of course they are," Eleanor sighed. "But it's too late. The truth is already out." She moved to her desk, pulling out a legal pad, her pen moving swiftly, mapping out the next steps. Courtroom assault, witnesses, video evidence, Kerrigan's record, the buried complaints, potential collaborators. Leo watched her. "This is going to be ugly, Judge." "Justice often is, Leo." He hesitated. "Commissioner Evans called while you were on the bench, left a message, sounded managed." Eleanor looked up, a wry twist to her lips. Managed? Or panicked? Before Leo could reply, her desk phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID, then answered crisply. "Judge Vance." "Eleanor, it's Andrew Evans." The chief commissioner's voice was carefully modulated, attempting calm. "I was expecting your call, Commissioner, though perhaps not quite so urgently." "I assume you understand the gravity of this situation?" he asked. "I understand that one of your sergeants assaulted me in my courtroom," she replied evenly. A pause on the other end. "Eleanor, I'm not defending Kerrigan's actions. They were unacceptable. But you need to understand the potential fallout here. You're pulling a thread that could unravel years of delicate balances." "Delicate balances, Commissioner? Or convenient arrangements that protected abusive officers?" "Look," Evans's voice hardened slightly. "You want Kerrigan held accountable? Fine. I'll support formal charges through the DPP. But if you start dragging other names into this, senior officers, prosecutors, based on old rumors..." "These aren't rumors, Commissioner. These are patterns, and I intend to expose them." "You're escalating this unnecessarily." "No, Commissioner. I am revealing what has been allowed to fester in the dark for too long." Another silence, heavier this time. Then Evans' tone shifted again, becoming almost pleading. "Think about the force, Eleanor. Think about the city. Chaos won't serve anyone." "Chaos is what happens when justice is denied repeatedly," she retorted. "Maybe it's time we stopped managing the rot and started rebuilding from a clean foundation." The line went dead. Eleanor stared at the receiver, then placed it down gently. Leo raised an eyebrow. Sounded like he was offering a deal and a threat. "He was," Eleanor confirmed. "He's scared." Just then, the door opened again. Investigator Grace Nash from Professional Standards entered, followed by Investigator Raj Sharma. Nash, a sharp, no-nonsense woman, got straight to the point. "Judge, we've been looking at Kerrigan for months. Couldn't make anything stick. Too many missing files, recanted witness statements." Sharma, younger, intense, added, "This incident gives us probable cause for a wider investigation. We need your formal statement. But more than that, we need to know how far you want this to go." Eleanor didn't hesitate. "All the way." Sharma nodded slowly. "Then I think it's time we showed you something." He produced a USB drive, plugged it into a laptop, and turned the screen towards Eleanor. It displayed an internal report from 2 years prior, an anonymous excessive force complaint against Kerrigan involving a teenager. The case was closed. Lack of evidence. Crucially, the body cam footage was noted as corrupted, unavailable. Eleanor scrolled down to the signature approving the dismissal. "Inspector M. Thompson. Retired last year," Nash supplied. "Kerrigan's mentor, and fiercely loyal." Sharma brought up another file. "We found 3 more suppressed complaints against Kerrigan. Different victims, different years, same outcome. And one name, keeps appearing as the Crown prosecutor who declined to pursue charges. He highlighted it. Gavin Ross. A name Eleanor knew well. A prosecutor who frequently handled Kerrigan's cases, known for securing plea deals, especially from vulnerable defendants. Eleanor felt a chill despite the stuffy room. This wasn't just Kerrigan. It was a network. Nash leaned forward. We believe Ross, Thompson, and potentially others actively worked to shield Kerrigan. This assault wasn't just impulsive. It might have been rooted in Kerrigan feeling untouchable because for years he was. Eleanor looked from Nash to Sharma, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Get me everything, she commanded, her voice low but intense. Every case Kerrigan and Ross handled together. Every complaint Thompson buried. Every connection. I want the entire network mapped out. Sharma raised an eyebrow. That's a massive undertaking, Judge. It could take months. Pull in judges, politicians. Then don't waste any time, Eleanor stated firmly. They tried to silence me with a slap. They have no idea the noise I'm about to make. Outside her chambers, the courthouse buzzed. The story was spreading. Investigators Nash and Sharma exchanged a look. They had investigated corruption before, but this felt different. Judge Eleanor Vance wasn't just a victim seeking justice. She was a force, preparing to dismantle the machine from the inside out, and the machine was already starting to fight back. By 6:00 a.m. the following morning, Judge Vance's chambers resembled a command center more than a judicial office. Files overflowed onto chairs, whiteboards were covered in diagrams connecting names and dates, and the air hummed with the low murmur of focused investigation. Eleanor, Leo Murphy, investigators Nash and Sharma had worked through the night, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of urgency. The scale of the corruption they were uncovering was staggering. 19 formal complaints against Kerrigan, 12 more against officers directly under his command at various times. A disturbing pattern emerged. Arrests often based on flimsy evidence, charges frequently withdrawn or pleaded down by Crown Prosecutor Ross, and internal reviews consistently clearing the officers, often signed off by the now-retired Inspector Thompson, or, alarmingly, Justice Robert Sterling. Leo Murphy let out a low whistle as he reviewed a file. 4 different prosecutors refused to proceed on Kerrigan cases citing insufficient evidence despite eyewitnesses and, in 2 cases, medical reports. How does that keep happening? It happens, Investigator Nash stated grimly, when the prosecution service is compromised or intimidated, or both. Ross wasn't just declining cases, he was actively managing Kerrigan's exposure. Investigator Sharma pointed to a specific log. And look at this. 2 separate body cam videos from Kerrigan-involved arrests noted as technical malfunction during internal review. Both malfunctions occurred just before professional standards requested the footage. Eleanor absorbed the information, her expression hardening. This isn't negligence, she stated. This is a calculated conspiracy. Her office phone rang, startling them in the quiet room. She answered curtly. Judge Vance. The voice on the other end was smooth, cultured, and instantly recognizable, sending a chill down her spine despite the years. Eleanor? It's Rob Sterling. Justice Robert Sterling. Her former mentor, the man who had championed her rise to the bench. Robert, she replied, keeping her voice carefully neutral. I imagine, Sterling began, his tone casual, almost paternal, that my name might have surfaced in the unpleasantness surrounding Sergeant Kerrigan. It has, Eleanor confirmed. Eleanor, listen to me. Sterling's voice lowered conspiratorially. David Kerrigan is a thug, always has been. He deserves whatever's coming to him, but digging deeper, involving names like Ross, questioning past decisions, it serves no one. It destabilizes the system. The system is already unstable, Robert, because it protected men like Kerrigan. My dear, Sterling sighed, some things are necessary for order, certain arrangements. You pursue this, you risk tearing down structures that, believe it or not, keep the city from chaos. You could damage reputations, careers, including your own. Are you threatening me, Robert? I'm advising you, Eleanor, as a friend. Let Kerrigan fall. Let professional standards handle the rest quietly. Don't burn down the house to catch one rat. What if the house is already infested? She countered softly. A long pause. Think carefully, Eleanor, about your future, about who your allies really are. He hung up. Eleanor slowly placed the receiver down, her hand trembling slightly. Leo Murphy watched her, his face grim. He just confirmed it, didn't he? Eleanor nodded numbly. The betrayal cut deeper than Kerrigan's slap. The man she respected, the man who represented judicial integrity, was part of the rot. Just then, Investigator Nash's phone pinged. She read the message, her eyes widening slightly. "We just got confirmation on the second voice from Kerrigan's locker room recording 2 years ago. The one talking about silencing you if you stepped too far." Eleanor braced herself. "It was Ross," Nash confirmed, and forensic accounting just traced that Police Association Welfare Fund donation used for Kerrigan's legal defense last year. The shell company links back to a holding firm whose primary board member— She paused, looking directly at Eleanor. "Is Justice Robert Sterling." The air left the room. Leo Murphy swore under his breath. Sterling hadn't just covered for Kerrigan, he had actively funded his defense, likely using slush funds, while simultaneously mentoring the judge Kerrigan had threatened. The sheer audacity, the depth of the hypocrisy, was breathtaking. Eleanor felt a cold fury replace the shock. "They thought they owned this city," she whispered. "They thought they were untouchable." Her phone buzzed again, this time an unknown number. A text message. "Nice place in Brighton. Does your nephew still ride his bike home alone from school?" The blood drained from her face. She passed the phone to Leo, whose face hardened instantly. "That son of a—" "Don't," Eleanor interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet. She walked to the window, staring out at the waking city. The threat wasn't subtle anymore. They were coming after her family. "Leo," she said, turning back, her eyes blazing, "I need my nephew picked up from school, now, discreetly, and I want trusted security on my sister's house by noon." Leo was already dialing. Eleanor turned to Nash and Sharma. "Kerrigan is under police guard?" "Yes, pending transfer to a secure facility," Sharma confirmed. "Good, because they just made this personal, and they have no idea who they're dealing with." Nash nodded slowly. "What's the play, Judge?" Eleanor walked back to her desk, picking up the legal pad where she'd mapped out the network. "They want to play dirty? Fine. We change the game. I want a public hearing. Today." Nash raised an eyebrow. "Regarding?" "My recusal," Eleanor stated. "I'm stepping down from the Kerrigan case, but not for the reasons they think. I'm doing it publicly, and I'm bringing receipts." Sharma grinned slightly. "Going on offense?" "No," Eleanor corrected, a fierce light in her eyes. "I'm going nuclear." The courthouse was a hive of activity by 9 o'clock a.m. Reporters swarmed the corridors, lawyers huddled in hushed conversations. Judge Eleanor Vance entered the main courtroom, not in robes, but in a sharp black blazer, flanked by Leo Murphy and Investigator Nash. At the prosecution table sat Crown Prosecutor Ross, looking pale, and beside him, Elliot Parrish from the state's Judicial Conduct Commission, the designated formal presence. "Judge Vance," Parrish began smoothly, "we're here to discuss your recusal motion." "Let's make it public record," Eleanor interrupted, her voice ringing out. "The DPP's office implies I'm emotionally compromised. Let me be clear. I am recusing myself not due to bias, but because the corruption surrounding Sergeant Kerrigan extends far beyond him and directly involves members of the prosecution and potentially the judiciary itself." She gestured to Nash, who placed files on the table. The buried complaints, the missing logs, the financial trace linked to Sterling's fund, the transcript of Kerrigan's threat. "Mr. Ross," Eleanor addressed him directly, "did you decline to prosecute Sergeant Kerrigan on 5 separate occasions, despite compelling evidence?" Ross stammered, objecting. "Mr. Parrish," Eleanor turned to the commission rep, "are you aware that Justice Sterling, who oversees judicial assignments in this jurisdiction, benefited financially from a fund used to defend Sergeant Kerrigan?" Parrish looked flabbergasted. Eleanor faced the press. This city deserves to know that the system designed to protect them has been manipulated by those sworn to uphold it. Today is not about a slap. It is about dismantling a network of corruption that has festered for years. The courtroom exploded. Shouts, flashing cameras, chaos. Ross fled. Parrish looked shell-shocked. Eleanor stood tall amidst the storm she had unleashed. They had threatened her family, tried to silence her. They had underestimated Judge Eleanor Vance, and the reckoning had truly begun. The cell felt different now. Colder, smaller. David Kerrigan sat on the concrete bench, the bravado stripped away, leaving only a raw, gnawing fear. The confidence, the swagger, the certainty that the brotherhood and powerful friends would shield him. It had all dissolved in the harsh glare of Judge Vance's courtroom and the subsequent federal and state investigations. He wasn't just suspended anymore. He was facing serious criminal charges. He thought back to the shadowy figure who had visited him, the one who offered a lifeline tied to an anchor, the one who had suggested using Eleanor Vance's family as leverage. Kerrigan had passed on the information, made the implied threat through intermediaries, convinced it would force her to retreat. Instead, she had gone nuclear, just as she had implicitly promised. Now, the handlers were silent. The burner phone provided was useless. The promises of protection had vanished into thin air. He was alone, truly alone, with the wreckage of his career and the very real prospect of prison looming large. He wondered briefly if that kid Patterson, the one whose minor case inadvertently triggered this avalanche, ever had his charges dropped. He found himself hoping so. It was a strange, unfamiliar sensation. Across town, Eleanor Vance walked through the halls of the county court, no longer as a presiding judge in that specific building, but as a catalyst whose actions were reshaping the state's legal landscape. The smear campaign hadn't entirely ceased, but it had lost its potency, drowned out by the torrent of evidence against the network she had meticulously exposed. Crown Prosecutor Gavin Ross was negotiating a plea deal, reportedly implicating others higher up in the DPP's office and judiciary. Justice Robert Sterling was officially suspended, facing a judicial conduct inquiry that promised public disgrace, regardless of the legal outcome. The retired Inspector Thompson was under investigation for his role in burying complaints over decades. The threads were unraveling, leading investigators into counsel contracts, political donations, and potentially even the suspicious death of the journalist Kate Riley. Eleanor met with investigators Nash and Sharma, along with officials from the newly formed Joint Task Force. The conference table was laden with files, timelines, and financial records. "Sterling is trying to cut a deal," reported the lead task force investigator, offering details on manipulation of judicial assignments and political fundraising in exchange for leniency on the misconduct charges. Eleanor considered it, her expression unreadable. "Does his information connect to the private security firm? The one Kate Riley was looking into before she died?" Nash nodded. "It fits perfectly. We believe the firm handled off-the-books surveillance. Possibly more. Sterling likely had knowledge, even if indirectly." "No deals for Sterling," Eleanor stated firmly. "He betrayed his oath. He mentored me while protecting corrupt officers. He needs to face the full measure of the law." The fight remained intensely personal, fueled by the profound betrayal. She knew the risks persisted. The forces she challenged were wounded, but still powerful, embedded within the state's structures. The feeling of being watched hadn't entirely disappeared. Leo Murphy remained her constant, watchful presence. The press conference announcing the first wave of indictments was held on the steps of Parliament House, a deliberate choice of venue. This time, Eleanor stood beside the State Attorney General, a symbol of the now aligned forces demanding accountability. 12 names were read out: Kerrigan, Ross, Sterling, several senior police officers, the retired Thompson, even a local MP implicated in the funding scandal. It sent shockwaves through Victoria. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was fractured. The trial of David Kerrigan began 3 weeks later. It was relatively swift. The courtroom video was damning. Ben Evans's testimony was credible and unwavering. Other officers, seeing the tide turn, corroborated key details. Kerrigan offered a weak defense, clinging to denial, but his arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollow look. The jury returned guilty verdicts on all counts: assault, intimidation, perverting the course of justice. The sentence was significant, sending a clear message. Eleanor attended the sentencing, sitting quietly at the back, watching Kerrigan being led away, evoked no triumph, only a deep sadness for the abuse of power, the lives impacted, the erosion of public trust. The true victory lay not in his downfall, but in the systemic reforms his actions had finally necessitated. In the following months, Melbourne began a slow, arduous process of rebuilding. The new police commissioner, Andrew Evans, implemented reforms with vigor, working closely with the strengthened Professional Standards Command and the new Civilian Oversight Board. Ben Evans, despite facing lingering resentment from some peers, was promoted and tasked with leading community engagement initiatives, his integrity now seen as an asset. The Joint Task Force continued its work, uncovering further layers of misconduct, leading to more resignations and expected indictments. One crisp autumn afternoon, Eleanor Vance returned to the county court building, the place where the slap had echoed. The courtroom was empty, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. She stood before the bench, reflecting on the tumultuous journey. Leo Murphy found her there. "They want to name the law library wing after you, Judge," he said softly. Eleanor allowed a small smile. "Tell them I'd prefer the Kate Riley reading room. She died trying to expose this." Leo nodded. "Figured you'd say that." He hesitated. "The Judicial Commission cleared you completely. Whispers about the Supreme Court." Eleanor looked at the empty judge's chair, then back at Leo. "It's flattering, Leo, but my work on the bench is done." That afternoon, she submitted her resignation. Her public statement concluded, "Institutions require constant vigilance and renewal. I helped clear the ground of long overdue weeds. It is time for new gardeners to cultivate the future." Months later, Eleanor was back in Brighton, sitting on her sister's veranda. The quiet felt different now, earned, peaceful. Her nephew rode up on his bike, dropping it on the lawn before bounding up the steps. "Auntie Ellie!" He hugged her fiercely. "Saw you on the telly. They said you were really brave." She held him close. "Sometimes being brave just means telling the truth, love. Even when it's hard," she whispered. They sat together as the sun dipped towards Port Phillip Bay. The city skyline glittered in the distance. The fight wasn't truly over, but a significant battle had been won. A corrupt network was dismantled, accountability was being enforced, and the foundations for a more just system were, however slowly, being laid. Eleanor closed her eyes, breathing in the sea air, finally allowing herself a moment of quiet peace. The storm had passed, leaving devastation, but also clearing the path ahead. This story serves as a stark reminder. Justice is not passive. It must be demanded, fought for, and protected, especially when confronting systems designed to resist change. Judge Eleanor Vance's journey shows that true leadership isn't about maintaining power, but about wielding it responsibly, even at great personal cost. Her courage, mirrored by those like Officer Evans and amplified by community voices, demonstrates that even deeply entrenched corruption can be challenged when individuals refuse to accept the status quo. For every generation, but perhaps especially for those who have witnessed decades of slow progress and setbacks, this narrative underscores the enduring power of integrity and the necessity of vigilance. Change may be incremental, justice may be imperfect, but the fight itself holds profound meaning. If Judge Vance's stand against injustice resonated with you, if you believe in the power of truth and accountability, please like this video, share it to inspire others, and subscribe for more stories that champion the human spirit's capacity for resilience and change. Thank you for being part of this journey. May we all find the courage to speak out when it matters most.